Good evening, everyone. We are learning Parshas Chayei, and we'll start from the beginning of the Parsha, Perek Chav Gimel, chapter 23, Pasuk Aleph, verse 1. Vayiyu Chayei, and the years of Sarah were Mea Shana, 100 years, the Esrim Shana, and 20 years, the Sheva Shanim, and 7 years, 127 years altogether. Shnei Chayei, these are the years of the life of Sarah. Vatamas Sarah B'Kiryas Arba hi Chevron be'Eretz Canaan. Sarah died in a place called Kiryas Arba, which is Chevron, in the land of Canaan. Vayavoy Avraham l'spoila Sarah v'liv kaisa. And Avram came to eulogize Sarah and to cry over her. So as Rashi points out, Avraham was not present when Sarah passed away. He was coming back from the Akedas Yitzchak, from the binding of Yitzchak that was described in last week's Parsha. And so he came to where she had died, which is where they had been living. And he came, the Torah says, to eulogize her and to cry over her. Okay, so do we know what he said in his eulogy?
No.
So, there is the Medrash. The Medrash Tanchuma says that Avraham actually eulogized her with the words of Eishes Chayil. Now, Eishes Chayil, on Friday night, people say Shalom Aleichem. They sing the song Shalom Aleichem. And after that, they have what's called the song of Eishes Chayil. Probably most people are accustomed to say it, at least. I can't say how many. A lot of people do. My family actually doesn't. But many people do. And Eishes Chayil is actually verses from the book of Mishlei, the book of Proverbs. It's at the end of the book of Proverbs. And it's a description of an Eishes Chayil, of an accomplished woman. And actually, in the context of Mishlei, Rashi says it's meant to be a metaphor for Torah. So all the descriptions of the Eishes Chayil are actually meant to be describing different aspects of the Torah. But in itself, these words are a description of an Eishes Chayil, which many will translate as an accomplished woman. And it talks about all the things that she does. And just give me 1 second. Let me just get a Tanakh here. Or actually, just get a sitter. Okay. Here it's in the Siddur for the Friday night meal. And, I'm just going to read a few of the verses. Just read a few of them. Okay. Eishes Chayil meyim tzavarachek b'pnine michra, batach b'alei bala v'shalal lo yachsar, malasu tova lo ra kol yamei chayeha. An accomplished woman who can find. Far beyond pearls is her value. Her husband's heart relies on her, and he shall lack no fortune. She repays his good, but never his harm, all the days of her life. Dor shatzemer upishtim v'atas b'chepetz kapeha. She seeks out wool and linen, and her hands work diligently. And then there are other descriptions of what she does. I'm going to read another pasuk because this is one of the pasukim that we're going to get back to. Zamama sadavati kocheyu mepri chapeha natakarim. She envisions a field and buys it. From the fruit of her handiwork, she plants a vineyard. She's a bit of an entrepreneur also. She sees a field that she wants, she acquires it. It talks about all the different things that she does for her home. Nothing's lacking in her home. It also mentions Kappa Parsa La'ani B'Yodeh Chalev. She spreads out her palm to the poor and extends her hands to the destitute. Further on, it describes Pia Pascha B'Chachma V'Sayres Chesed Al Lashona. Her mouth opens with wisdom, and the Torah, the teaching of kindness, is on her tongue. And then at the end it says, her children arise and praise her, her husband lauds her, and they say, many banais, many daughters have done well, but you surpass them all. And then it concludes, Sheker achein v'hevel hayefi, isha yiras Hashem hitisalo. False is grace and vain is beauty, a God-fearing woman, she should be praised. Tenula mipri yadeha, give her the fruits of her hand, v'halelua b'shara ma'aseha, and let her be praised in the gates by her very own deeds. That's just a few of the verses of the description of the Eishes Chayil.
But what to say? He told what he said these words.
So it would sound like, and we have many examples. We have other examples of this, that the Medrash says that he said words that we think came about later, much later. And what it could mean, or what it means, or at least one way of interpreting it, is that he said these words. He came up with these words. He used these words in eulogizing her. And it was later, and it wasn't necessarily passed on as being part of Torah or anything like that. And later on, King Solomon, who composed Mishlei, he then took those words and he incorporated into the Tanakh. He incorporated the book of Mishlei and became part of Tanakh. So Avraham may have already said them, but it was Shlomo HaMelech, who I'm going to assume did not know it from a tradition from Avraham, but rather, through the way that he came up with his words with Ruach HaKodesh, with the spirit of holiness, that he also put together those words and he incorporated into the book of Mishlei, which became part of Tanakh. Okay, so the Medrash says that he went in and used these words, but he used these words all as references to different aspects of Sarah's life. And we're going to go through a couple of them. Actually, maybe we're going to go through 3 of them. Okay. So the first part that it said is, and this is from the comments of Ar Gedalyahu, Rav Gedal Yeshur. He was the Rosh Hashiva of Yeshiva Torah Vadas. He passed away probably around 45 years ago or so or more. And he goes through different parts of this medrash. So one of the first psukim is Batach Lov Lev Bala. Her husband puts his trust in her. Masai, when was this? When he told her, say you're my sister. That first time when he went down to Egypt, he was concerned that they would kill him because they would want to take her. So he said, tell her you are my sister. And he trusted her that she would do that and she would keep to that. She does good to him and no evil all the days of her life. So this part of the eulogy was about what went down to Egypt. He put her trust in her when he said to her, say you're my sister. And her response was, and her actions were, she pays him back good and no bad all the days of her life. Now, what exactly are we referring to here? Are we just referring to the fact that he told her to do something and she kept it? And she didn't and she didn't squeal and she didn't say the truth? What exactly is included in here? So Rav Shur explains, and this is based on sources, that, part of when Avram said to Sarah, say you're my sister, he was really trying to tell her also is that we're going to face a very big challenge when we go down to Egypt. Egypt was the most spiritually corrupt place in the world. As advanced that it was, so to speak, in what we call civilization, but they were actually very corrupt, immoral people. And because of that, they really were a very strong source of spiritual impurity. Not spiritual impurity that comes from a dead body, but spiritual impurity that affects a person in a negative way. And by telling her, you're my sister, and saying that nothing should happen to you because you're going to say you're my wife, that was part of a bigger picture of remaining pure under these very difficult circumstances. And it was something that could have been a greater challenge to her as a woman. And therefore, he told her, say you're my sister, meaning stay pure. He relied on her. He trusted her that she would do that. And she actually outperformed it in the sense that even after she was taken captive to Paro, she still made sure to remain pure and clean and holy. So that this first part of the eulogy about he puts his trust in her, this referring to the fact that what happened in Egypt is not just about the fact that, he trusted her that she's not going to, squeal on him, that it's not true. She's really his wife. There was more to it than that. There was the whole idea of the purity that he trusted her that she would retain throughout their stay in Egypt. and again, at which she passed with flying colors because of the fact that she was taken by Paro, but she resisted everything while she was there, and she remained pure and holy.
But he didn't say anything like you. He just mentioned, somebody killed me.
But there was more to it than that.
Ah.
There was more. There was that, and there was more to it also about the fact that of remaining pure, which is included in that. You're right. When you just read it, it's like, say it that I shouldn't be killed, but it's also saying that, with surviving all this, right, with going along with this, that you're going to say you're my sister, we're going to survive and stay here in Egypt. The commentaries point out, I think this is something that that's based on the Zohar, that part of this whole of what he wanted her to do, of what he said to her about remaining my sister, don't let anything happen to you, is this idea of remaining holy and pure even under these very difficult situations. There's also a much more Kabbalistic explanation that's here, which I can't say I fully understand. I'm not going to go into right now, but we could keep it at this level, that this point of the eulogy was to say how he had put her trust in her, that they could go down in Egypt and remain pure. Okay, that's one thing. Now, another thing that's mentioned, which we pointed out, is it says, Darsha tsemer upishtim, which means she seeks out tsemer, wool, and pishtim is linen. And she works with it. She makes things with it. These are the materials that she uses to make things with it. Says the Medrash, what is this referring to? Ben Yitzchak lishmael. The fact that she separated Yitzchak and Yishmael. These words of Darsha Tzemer Upishtim, she seeks out wool and linen, somehow or another relates to the separation between Yitzchak and Yishmael. And then the next one we're going to mention is, as we also mentioned before, Zamama Sadavatika Chayu. She puts her mind to a field and she acquires it. What is that referring to? Zamama v'natla sada hamachpela v'sham nikpara. She put her mind and she took the field of Machpelah. That's the Ma'ares HaMachpelah, the cave Machpelah, and she was buried there. Now, this one we have to ask a question on. This one sounds like she sought out Machpelah as a burial place. And that's not what, if you look in the Chumash, it says she died, and Abram had to go now convince Ephron to buy the field. But not that she was the one who invested in the field. What does that even mean? Okay. So Rav Shur explains in a very interesting way. And again, he quotes sources. He doesn't say the exact sources, but he quotes sources because he probably sees it from, there's the Shem Shmuel, there's Sfas Emes. But the explanation he says is like this. And that is that part of Avraham and Sarah's mission in life was to rectify the sin of Adam and Chava, of Adam and Eve. And Sarah especially had that job. Because if you think about it, and you go back to that story where Hashem tells Adam, no eating from the tree of knowledge of good and bad, and who is the one that got him to eat it? Chava. She was the one she was the one. The Nachash was the one who worked on her, and then she went in and she gave to her husband. And as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago in Shul, according to many of the commentaries, it's like Adam says to Hashem, my wife gave me to eat. I trusted her.
Don't blame me.
I trusted her. And Hashem says, yeah, you trusted her, but this was something you should have been more careful. Okay, that's being very simple. That's keeping it very short. But she, at the end of the day, she was the main instigator. And now it was going to be Sarah's mission to rectify that. She's going to rectify that. And it's just to mention, there are other things that women do that's called a rectification of to rectify the sin of Chava. Women light Shabbos candles. When the sages instituted the law of Shabbos candles, did they say a woman has to light Shabbos candles? Nope. The household has to have Shabbos candles. It is not specifically put on women. But women took it upon themselves as a way of rectifying Chava sin. When a woman makes when you talk about separating challah from the dough, who does that? Women. Why? Simply because of the fact that they're the ones who are making the challah. But there it's also brought down. Women separate challah. It's something that women specifically do as part of rectifying the sin of chava. So here Sarah had the job of doing that. Now, how'd she do that? How was she going to do that? So we first have to go back to a discussion that I believe we did have here in Shul about what exactly went on there by eating from the tree of knowledge. Now, the Torah says there was a tree, Eitz Hadas Tovara, the tree of knowledge of good and bad. So we think that before eating from the tree, there was no bad. And once you ate from the tree, there was bad. But it's not what it says. It says the tree of knowledge between good and bad, which implies there already is good and bad. And the point is something is going to happen, though, if you eat from this tree. And the way that many commentaries explain, the Nefesh HaChaim, which is the approach that the Rav Shur is working with here, is the fact that, the whole question is, if there was no evil, then how did Adam sin? How did he sin? There's no evil. So the explanation given by Nefesh HaChaim, Chaim Elazar, is there was evil. The Nachash was evil. The thing is, though, that before eating from the tree of knowledge, it was very clear what is good and what is evil. I am essentially good, Adam and Chava. We are essentially good. That's evil, and it's very clear that it's evil. And there's nothing that's going to convince me it's not evil. It's like fire. I know exactly what it is. And by eating from the tree of knowledge, what happened now was, instead of it being very clear about what is evil and what is good, now, as the Torah says, they became those who know good and evil. Knowing good and evil really means, because there are places in the Torah where we find that the word for knowing means to fuse together, to come together. Yodei Tov Ra means if you eat from the tree of knowledge, evil and good will be fused together. They will no more be separate. They'll be together in you. You're going to have the evil in you. Good and evil is going to be fused, going to become one inside of you. And then when that happens, you're going to be confused what is good and evil. And it's going to be very hard to separate between good and evil, because since they're fused together, even when you do something good, there can be evil in it. There can be certain elements of evil. You do a mitzvah, but if you're doing it for praise and for glory, that's ra. That's a certain level of evil that's mixed in. So this is what was before was a clear separation between good and evil, and now they got mixed together. They became fused together. Now Sarah's job was going to do, what was she going to do now? What was she meant to do? She was meant to now try to make that separation again, to create that clarity again, to make sure that good and evil stay separate, that they should not be mixed together. Okay, now, so what's the example that's used there? What's the matter?
But this is future ideas. This is just woman so much responsible to take sin.
She had a very big responsibility because she was rectifying what Chava brought about.
What men should do?
Men should listen to their wives about that. When their wives tell them when their wives have the clarity of thought to say what's right and what's wrong, don't push them off. Listen, actually, he brought down that Avrohom rectified by Adam because Adam was chastised for listening to his wife, but listening to the wrong thing. And then Avrohom is told by Sarah, when Sarah says, chase out Yishmael, and Avram didn't like it, what did Hashem tell her? Hashem him, listen to her. He was listening to her for the right thing. That's how he rectified. But clearly, your point is good about the fact there's more on the woman for this.
The woman should fix the sin.
She should fix the sin in the sense of making the clarity between good and evil. So now, the example was separating between Yitzchak and Yishmael. Yitzchak and Yishmael can't be together. Yishmael actually, in some ways, used to at least portray himself as a righteous person. The Medrash says that Yishmael used to say to Yitzchak, how old were you when you had a bris?
Well,
8 days. How old was I?
13.
13. I had a bris, and I went along with it, and I accepted. I went along with it. He in many ways he would portray himself as a righteous individual. But Sarah, and as the Medrash points out from other actions of his, Sarah said, we can't have this mishmash here. We can't have this kind of person who's a confused person, who has good and evil mixed together, and we can't have the evil of Yishmael together with the good of Yitzchak. It has to be separate. It has to be separated. And that lies in the words of Darsha, Tzemer, Upishtim. Tzemer is wool, Pishtim is linen. Where else do we have in the Torah wool and linen?
Not the word.
Shatnez is a mixture of wool and linen. Darsha, she seeks out wool and linen, means she seeks to make sure they stay separate. That's referring to the separation of Yishmael and Yitzchak. This is where she went ahead and she did that. She made that separation.
But we usually believe with sharpness it's like hooks. We don't understand why.
Good. We still don't understand why, but that's the example being used. That's the metaphor that's being used here. And then Rav Shor goes on to say, and we find something similar by one of the other matriarchs, by Rivka. Rivka separates between who? Yaakov and Esav. Yitzchak wants Esav to have the blessings. Yitzchak wants a partnership between Yaakov and Esav. And Rivka says, no way. They cannot be, you cannot have them together. She also continued that separating. Now, with that, he explains what it means when the pasuk says that she put her mind to the field and she acquired it, referring to acquiring which field? Ma'aras HaMachpelah. Now we can understand what that means. What that means is that setting her mind to it doesn't mean she actually was looking into it and acquiring it before. But because of what she was doing during her lifetime, because of what she was doing to rectify the sin of Chava, by separating between good and evil, she now could merit to be buried in the same place where Adam and Chava were. Right? Maras HaMachpelah, Rashi brings on this week's parsha, actually, when Avraham bought it, there already were two bodies buried there. Those were the bodies of Adam and Chava. They were there already. And now I wanted to purchase it for Sarah and eventually for him and for everybody else. So setting out puts her mind to the field doesn't mean she was focusing on acquiring it, but because of the fact that she led her life in a way that she was rectifying the sin of Chava, that was how she was putting her mind to the field, and she was buried there. She merited to be buried there because of the fact that she had fulfilled her mission in life of separating between good and bad to rectify the sin of Chava. So these are just a couple of the examples of Avraham's eulogy for his wife Sarah. Thank you all for listening. Have a good evening.
That's an idea. This like a woman